Welcome back to the show, everybody. The fiat money bubble, it's very, very real, and so is the G20 roadmap with the BIS, World Bank, and others. Bretton Woods 2.0. Is it unrolling right before our eyes? Let's roll the beautiful intro and find out.
Digital Perspectives with Brad Kimes. Come on in.
Welcome back to the show, everybody. You can follow us on TikTok, YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook for exclusive content. $973 billion market cap for crypto. Shout out to CoinPeprika. Download that app, ladies and gentlemen. I want to tell you, first of all, thank you to everybody that's following us on TikTok. We had a video go viral, almost 90,000 views, and we don't even quite have 10,000 followers on there yet. So really remarkable response. Bitcoin right now, 19,200 plus, Ethereum 1,300 plus, XRP 52 cents right now, ladies and gentlemen, and we're up 12.53% on the 7-day. Good afternoon, everybody. Link to right here. You can get some of the best private equity, ladies and gentlemen, in the space, whether it's blockchain, logistics, fintech, artificial intelligence, you name it. It's right here, democratizing finance, ladies and gentlemen. And Ripple happens to be one of them, along with many others. You can even get linked to itself. You have to be an accredited investor. But if you're not, click the link and see what it takes to get accredited. I know everybody hearing my voice is trying to think about creating generational wealth or getting their time back with their family. Make sure you check out that link, not financial advice. Just a reminder, 11 days ago, and nothing, says Tipsy Tiger, from either the SEC or Ripple. My questions still are, why didn't Judge Torres, give the SEC a deadline to turn the documents over? And why haven't Ripple asked for a deadline? Haven't heard one credible explanation to date. Here he says, okay, so after much back and forth with this person, Cherry and Press 21, shout out to Sherry and some others, the reason for no date setting by the judge or Ripple chasing the judge is as follows for us non-lawyer types. The SEC can either file for a motion of reconsideration or interlocutory appeal. Both of these are different legal options for the SEC with different typical filing timeframes. Motion for reconsideration typically filed 14 days. Interlocutory appeal would be typically filed within 30 days. It's thought this hasn't stopped Ripple. This hasn't stopped Ripple asking the SEC to direct for the documents. But until these timeframes have been passed or any appeal by the SEC is filed, Ripple's hands are, this is his kind of thinking now, tied. He says, i.e. they have no ground writing to Torres yet. Remember, folks, justice delayed is justice denied. I think it's such an incredible point, too. There's no question. You know, I talked to Big Skinny. You know how we take counsel with Big Skinny here on this channel. And he had said as well, I thought he made a very good point too, that if you feel like you're winning, you really don't want to tempt fate with the judge and be pushy, right? If you feel like you're already in a great position, just let the judge do what the judge does. And this here is John Deaton going to lay it down for you as well. Take a listen to this.
Hey, I can admit, dude, I'm wrong sometimes, right? So you guys were right and I was wrong because, and I'll tell you exactly what I'm talking about. If you recall, the last time I was on your show, I said that, listen, we haven't seen the SEC brief yet. We haven't seen all the evidence yet. And I actually predicted that the SEC would have a couple gems against Ripple. And I said it may be a couple bad days of publicity for Ripple. I don't know if you remember me saying that. I said, yeah. You know, we haven't seen all the evidence and there's got to be more that I'm missing. Now, that was an assumption I was making. Like, this can't be it. And then I read the summary judgment and I said, holy shit, there's nothing there. Like, there's no more egregious conduct behind the scenes. There was, you know, it was, well, here's an email. Of course, no XRP holder would be privy to this stuff. Here's an email where Chris Larson said, I love it because an employee said, hey, XRP holders like something, right? Or this or that. Well, none of that stuff is out there. All that complaint says, guys, is that Ripple promoted the shit out of Ripple. And Ripple promoted XRP. That's it.
And how about that? Think about that for a moment. And that to me is pretty damn compelling to understand that. And I tell you, there's many different perceptions of reality to this case, I believe. And I think there's multiple things to see from many different angles is what I'm getting at here. And one of which I absolutely agree with John Deaton. This case was certainly weaponized to the people in the know, I believe, against Ripple and XRP, because I believe they ultimately understood from inside, probably information inside baseball, what the ultimate goal and use of Ripple and XRP would be. This is my speculation, but I do believe that, and I believe it really speaks to what John Deaton has said all along, and certainly at the very least on the shallow end of the pool, just straight out human greed. But at the end of the day, it could also be to bullpen Ripple and XRP from the U.S. retail investor while they prepare to use it for possibly a new introduction of a brand new non-state-backed currency, like the Bancor coin that was introduced in the original Bretton Woods. And we may be witnessing the rollout of a Bretton Woods 2.0. Take a look at this clip. I'm not going to play the music, but it's going to be a very quick graph here. Matter of fact, I'll let it play while I talk. Central bank assets. And look how they really start to mount up here. 2011 to 2012, 2013. And we know what happened in 08. We had the collapse in 9. They blew it up, right? Well, we kind of came out of that, obviously coming into 2020. You see the printing just goes insane. 21. And now we're starting to crest over like we've hit a crown here. Are you ready for the great unwind, says Dylan LeClaire. And I do believe there is a moment coming that is going to be very reminiscent of that. And to a degree, so does Kristalina Georgieva from the IMF. She's the managing director. Listen to these ominous statements. Shout out to Darren Moore for this clip. And if it was Darren, kudos to you for sneaking a little bit of the Bearable Guy 1, 2, 3 stuff on top of it. Take a watch.
In front of you, behind me, is the painting of Athena, the Greek goddess of wisdom, and a very good reference point for what I'm going to be talking to you about today. Our world economy is like ship in choppy waters. We need all the wisdom we can muster to steady the ship and navigate through what lies ahead. In less than 3 years, we lived through shock after shock after shock. First, COVID, then Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and climate disasters on all continents. These shocks have caused immense harm on people's lives.
And it really is true. And I'll say to this, the narrative is really becoming quite clear. I really feel, and I'm speculating, as you all know, that what we're seeing with the G20 roadmap, what we're seeing with 90 plus central banks, in some phase or development or piloting implementation of CBDCs, is really the understanding of a Bretton Woods 2.0, a new moment that's been called on by Bretton Woods, a new moment that's been called on by a Great Reset, which is slightly different approach from the World Economic Forum. But listen now and tell me if this doesn't align as well from the U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen.
The world cannot afford to delay or lower our ambitions. The current challenges are urgent. And that is why I, along with leaders from a broad group of countries, will be calling on World Bank management at the annual meetings next week to work with shareholders to develop a World Bank evolution roadmap by December.
Now, and then talk about implementing it into 23, April or spring of 23. the narrative is becoming very clear and unavoidable now. And as we look at this information going through the rest of this video, I just want to say something to be clear. When the original Bretton Woods happened, everyone knew that that moment was happening. It was happening very openly through the world when the change from the pound to the US dollar as the global reserve currency was going to be happening. You know, that wasn't unknown. That was a global conversation that was taking place. I believe that if we really are going to be in, or we're seeing a rollout of a Bretton Woods 2.0, at some point, the curtain will be pulled back and the conversation will have to be as clear as we're having it here today. Because here's the facts. And here's some speculation here from William Lawley, who is amazing and killer insight. Give him a follow. Shout out to you, William. In my opinion, U.S. debt reset will occur because if you understand that a Bretton Woods 2.0 is going to introduce a new currency as a global reserve, or certainly to sit beside it, that's already the U.S. dollar, you have to entertain the notion of how that happens. What does that look like? Well, you're going to have to be able to deal with the debt holders of the bonds out here in the world. William says U.S. debt reset will require this, he says. U.S. Treasury takes custody of Federal Reserve balance sheet assets. U.S. Treasury nullifies of sovereign debt. U.S. Treasury replace Federal Reserve note with U.S. notes. See picture. U.S. Treasury adopts USD coin as legal tender. I've talked about that one a lot. And U.S. Treasury decouples from the U.S. dollar as the world reserve. William, incredible insights. Take a look at this very quickly. You see, it doesn't say Federal Reserve note. That says United States note. What if we're about to go back to something like that, ladies and gentlemen, in order to deal with the money printing that's going on? You know, I covered this just yesterday or this morning, which is U.S. Congressman introduced yesterday gold standard bill as inflation spirals out of control. This is really referred to as the Gold Restoration Act. And it's really calling for the repegging of the Federal Reserve note to gold in order to address the ongoing problems of inflation, runaway federal debt, and monetary system instability. Now, the piece we looked at just before that, suggested by William, is the introduction of new money. A United States note instead of a Federal Reserve note. That's a very, very interesting thought. Listen to this throwback from when Rosie Rios was at the Treasury.
It's a little bit about what I do. So I oversee the Bureau of Engraving and Printing, where we produce our currency. I also oversee the U.S. Mint, where we produce our coins. That also includes custodial responsibility for our gold reserves. So Fort Knox is under me as well. All bullion production, all precious metal, platinum, silver, gold is under me as well. And for those of you who don't know, the next gen $100 note is the last denomination of that particular family of notes. We're working on the future generation of currency. So that is my other job, is I'm the chair of the Advanced Counterfeit Deterrence Steering Committee. So as the chair, I oversee the collaborative effort of designing future currency. And
a new kind of money. That's what she worked on right before she left out of the Treasury, and then sometime later becomes a Ripple board member. Am I speculating? You bet your ass I am. And I'm feeling good about it. The BIS Committee on Payments and Market Infrastructure and Financial Stability Board highlight that G20 roadmap for enhancing cross-border payments has reached an inflection point, they say. And they highlight other things here, as well as focusing on themes like payment system interoperability and extension, legal, regulatory, and supervisory frameworks, cross-border data exchange and message standards, as well as other things, all for this public and private sector can direct resources towards work most likely to have the biggest impact by 2027 target date, they're saying in this, which means the ball's got to get rolling here, ladies and gentlemen, right? Then we see in the G20 roadmap information reports and world report, we're going to look at some of that data. They talk about here CPMI members and national authorities of other jurisdictions supporting the adoption of harmonized version of ISO 20022. This is where we talked about the continuity of the messaging language, ISO 20022. And the harmonization of this, which I call through the standardization, I believe can play a key pivotal role in the Jevons paradox, where we see the efficiency brought to a thing like this, and the standardization brought to it can actually accelerate the use of it, and then sprinkle in the option to have access to digital assets for settlement at some point. And boy, have you really got something there. Here you can see again, this I believe was from the world. This is certainly Michael Crypto here, and shout out to Cowboy Crypto. But this right here is, I believe, from the World Bank. It might be the G20. There's some overlap, but we're going to look at it again. But I know I did see this at one point, I think, in the World Bank report, talking again about adopting a harmonized ISO 20022 version for messaging formats, including rules, conversions, and mapping, harmonizing API protocols for data exchange, establishing unique identifiers with proxy registers. You know, this stuff fascinates me. And then I start asking myself, well, you know, is the World Bank got it wrong? Does the World Bank not know what they're talking about? The World Bank associated, this is November 2021, associated directly linked to IMF. You tell me, do they have it wrong? Is XRP and XLM not stable coins? Because that's what they say they are. And what if it is correct, like William Lawley proposed in some shape or fashion there, or directly as he wrote it? What if Rosie Rios literally is working on, back at the Treasury at the time she was there, a digital version of money to be introduced? And was it a Federal Reserve notes and CBDCs of that ilk? Or was it a United States dollar or something that will be a new dollar introduced to deal with the bloat that has been created of circulating money and debt and buying their own assets back? You know, it fascinates me that a lot of people push back and say that this moment can't happen. But this moment is actually a part of a cycle. And not only can it happen, I believe that it will happen. I just don't know exactly when. And speaking of not knowing exactly when, I don't know when XRP is going to moon either, but I'll tell you this, all the information we just looked at is what I'm really here for. Now, I have used XRP as a currency and a unit of account, medium of exchange. I absolutely have done that and do it often. But I also have it because I believe there will be a time when the world is going to need to adopt a technology that works, that does what it says it can do. I also happen to believe that part of the reality of that SEC versus Ripple case is to define exactly what that is. And if it doesn't happen through this court case, it happens through Congress or the U.S. Treasury and FSOC, because I believe XRP to be money just as the World Bank does. Not financial advice from me or anyone else, ladies and gentlemen. Ledger is doing free shipping right now. Click the link underneath my video. Don't mess around. Not your keys, not your crypto. I'll catch all of you on the next one.